Welcome to AZ Central's election show, where we bring you inside the newsroom to take a deeper dive into issues affecting the 2018 election. In this episode, we'll explore why women are playing such a pivotal role this cycle. First, we'll get you up to speed on voting demographics. Second, we'll take you inside the minds of 6 women who will talk to us a little bit about what issues are on their mind and what's motivating them this cycle. Lastly, our team of reporters will break down what they've heard.
Demographics. It's basically a fancy word for statistics on a population and the groups found within it. The population of the United States, for example, is about 328 million. Within that population, about half are male and half are female, and you could dice that even further into race, education level, family size, and all kinds of other things that scientists, marketers, governments, and political parties and campaigns may be interested in. And demographics are important because they change over time. That's where voting blocs come into play. Voting blocs are groups of potential voters who align and vote for a common interest. For example, you may remember hearing about white working class voters this past election cycle.
The politics of the white working class is economic anxiety and feeling.
Of course, there's also the young, college-educated voters.
Many millennials will go to the polls for the very first time this election.
But one voting bloc that's gotten a lot of attention lately, especially during the midterms, is, drumroll please, suburban women. Suburban women tend to be educated, upper middle class, and often married and white. The percentage of women voters has outnumbered men since 1980, and Democrats have won those votes every presidential election for 30 years. The last time a Democratic candidate lost with women voters was in 1988 when Michael Dukakis lost his presidential bid against George H.W. Bush. So why are suburban women in the spotlight now? Well, if voters disapprove of the president, the midterms are traditionally seen as a chance for them to share their views and to bolster the other party. And if Republicans are already on the ropes this election cycle, it could be women voters who push them out of the ring. Though President Donald Trump did not win a majority of women voters overall in 2016, he did win one important subset: white women. So, will the Republicans, and by extension President Trump, lose suburban women this election cycle? We'll see in November.
Women represent half of the population, but they care about 100% of the issues that face the nation, that's for sure.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us here today at the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. You are a very coveted bloc of the electorate this year. Between President Donald Trump's presidency, education issues that are obviously at the forefront of voters' minds here in Arizona, the Me Too movement, and the potential for Arizona to elect its first U.S. Senator, your vote could matter more than any other prior year. So we've asked you here today to kind of gauge your opinions on a variety of issues. As we head into this midterm election, your political identities largely mirror Arizona's electorate. We've got 2 Republicans, we have 2 independent-minded voters, we have 2 Democrats, and I want to reiterate, this is not a debate. We just are assembling you here to hear your voices, to get a sense of really what matters most to you as we head into the midterm election, so let's get started. Many of you have said you were not politically active or really engaged until after the 2016 election. What changed for you?
Well, I don't know that you have to be politically active to pay attention, to realize what's going on and to know that something needs to change, needs to happen differently than what happened the last time.
Jade?
Yeah, for me, I've always been involved and I've always paid attention. Being a lesbian in Arizona, you kind of can't ignore what's going on politically, and I know that our votes really matter. But I didn't get involved until after the 2016 election, because then I started to realize, like, no, if I want to create change in Arizona, I have to show up. I have to go to meetings. I need to hold my representatives accountable. And so for me, that's what really triggered me into attending my legislative district meetings, attending caucus meetings, going to the state party, and really getting involved and getting to know my candidates and really paying attention to the issues at the grassroots, not just the federal level.
Up until now, Rhonda and Barbie, have you ladies felt as though you've had a voice, both at the state capitol and on Capitol Hill? Do you feel like you're being represented?
Go ahead. I would say it's been extremely difficult for someone like me. I work in public education. I'm a school psychologist and a parent, and it's been extremely difficult for my voice to be heard when I don't fully agree and align with what happened this spring and how it happened. I support teacher raises 100%. I'm a school psychologist. I get that aspect. I support anyone's right to protest, but I did not support closing down our schools. And that was difficult to have that voice in the public education setting. And I don't feel like my voice, it was hard for me to express that.
What about you, Rhonda?
I don't feel like I'm ever kept quiet. I have been involved in local and federal politics since I was 13 years old, and I'm definitely much older than that now. And, I've always exercised my right to vote. For a period of time, I removed myself from local politics because I was a military spouse, and I didn't feel that I had a right to vote on things here that weren't affecting my family or wherever we were stationed at that time. So no, and I try very hard to, I'm a conservative leaning independent, raised Republican, and I tried very hard to keep an open mind with my super liberal friends, with my Democrat friends, with my Republican friends, and until it gets to a point of disrespect, I don't take offense.
I know when I put my kids to bed at night, I wonder, what tomorrow's going to look like, what things are going to look like down the road. What is the number one issue when we're talking about government and politics? What keeps you all up at night?
Everything. I think the thing that keeps me up at night the most, though, is just seeing what's going on across the country. We have people that are marching in the street with torches and have their racist propaganda out in the streets, and they're not afraid to speak loud and out about it. And we're seeing that here in Arizona, and that's really frightening for me. I don't want to bring up my children in this kind of environment. I want to create change. I want to give them a sustainable path forward with clean energy, proper education, with the resources and tools that they need, and not be afraid that my children are going to go to school and either be killed by gun violence or be racially profiled or be treated differently because they're a minority. That's not what I want my children in Arizona to see.
So I homeschool. My daughter had 2 incidents at public school since we've moved here in Arizona. All that I control is my daughter. I took her out, I run our businesses, and I homeschool her. She's my priority. I put her in summer school this year, and when, I might get a little shaky, but this is the thing. A lot of us adults say some mean stuff, especially behind social media. But I will tell you this, it's just like jet engine fuel. It has to fall somewhere. It falls down to us, right? That hate falls somewhere, and it falls down to my kid. When she's in summer school playing and having fun, and some other kid comes up and points to her and calls her a friggin' terrorist, that's hurtful. I didn't think, I knew I'd have to have a conversation because look at what I look like here in Arizona with a lot of people that show pictures like me and tell their kids, those are the terrorists. Yeah, no, I'm a mom.
I don't think Arizona is as racist as we're painted, and I appreciate that happens too, and I respect that. That's a horrible thing for your daughter. I'm married to an immigrant as myself, so my children they're mixed race, and I see the opportunities that are given here, and I think if there's ever a state, it's Arizona that understands that we are so mixed here. We've got people from all over the world. We have people coming in from across the border who have legally and sometimes illegally immigrated into our state, but we're used to the different color faces. We're used to the variety. We are actually very split, like you pointed out, in this state. I just don't see it it says so much as others people do.
I think that's a privilege to be able to live it. I think there's a huge dichotomy between my husband and my conversation about the same thing. And my daughter will have a different conversation. But I think those are two mutually exclusive conversations leading towards something similar where we can agree upon. But what happens almost weekly in my life is completely different. And half the things that have happened with me, I don't even voice out. I'm not saying it's Arizona, I'm saying it's the time. I'm saying the last year's gotten really thicker and happening more consistently, and I'm aware of it. I may not bring it up, but I'm aware of it. And for me, 4 years before, 4.5 years was a lot different than this last 2 years, for me personally. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's more of a societal issue, though, rather than a mob mentality. I think that we now live in a society where maybe it's because of being a military spouse, but if my kids were playing with other kids and one of the kids said something wrong, I would correct that child, just like I would expect other military moms and dads to correct my child if he did something wrong. We now live in a society where we can't even say, Jimmy, that wasn't very nice, you shouldn't say that, without threats of legal action. I mean, come on.
Rhonda, you get the final point on this.
What's been heavy on my heart, I feel like, is, I agree with you, the divide, I feel like, between people and different parties. I'd say parents versus teachers, it feels like there's a divide there. It feels like there's a divide with homeschool or charters versus public, and it's really hard to have a voice and have a calm discussion where we're all listening to everyone's viewpoints in that environment where we're so pit against each other. And so that's something, whatever I can do to help model that or create that, I want to do, because I feel like we do have a lot of common beliefs. And like just hearing each of you, I know we see things differently, we'll probably vote for different presidents, but we actually have some common core foundational similarities. So.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be writing a lot about the issues that you care about, and we will have a whole story talking about how women are feeling in this election. So thank you very much. We'll be talking to you offline, and thank you so much for joining us. So a lot of different opinions from a diverse group of women. What were your top takeaways?
I thought it was interesting that everybody hates negative political ads because people always say that, but then if you look at what they actually remember, they almost always remember those negative ads. They work. That's why political consultants pay money for them, dig up dirt on other candidates, and put them into ads. I think people on their most basic level, they don't want to be negative, but negative emotions are pretty powerful.
Very visceral reaction when asked if they liked those negative ads or not. Maria, what about you?
Kind of continuing on with not liking the negative or divisive rhetoric, we heard a lot from them, women from all different political backgrounds, different perspectives about how they felt like sometimes they couldn't speak out about how they felt. We heard from the school psychologist, I believe, who said, she supported teacher raises, but didn't support how Red for Ed movement went about it, felt like she couldn't really talk about that. And then I think from several other women that felt like, civility has been lost no matter where you stand. You can't talk to a lot of people on the other side.
There was a real heart-wrenching moment there at the end when we heard from Quailan. She is Indian. She has a child and experienced some really awful name calling, sounds like on the playground, and that prompted a really interesting discussion, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, what stood out to me was sort of the different experiences that these women have had. They're not all one size fits all. It's not just this is the woman's experience. We got to see some of the contours of that with Quailan's experience being different than, say, Cheryl or, Jade. And I think that it's a reminder really that there's, more diversity out there than just simple Democrat, Republican, male, female, conservative, liberal. There's a lot of different perspectives out there, and we should be looking for more of them.
And we talked about this during our discussion, but this is a very key portion of the electorate. All of the candidates, the campaigns are messaging to these women. They can be persuaded to go different ways. They're very discernible. They hold on to their ballots a lot longer than men do. They tend to think about things a little bit longer before they mail them in. In the final kind of stretch to the general election, do any of you have a sense of the different tactics that might be employed to try to reach voters like these women?
I don't know, it sounded like the tutu ad may have turned some of them off, but here's the thing, they remembered it. So they're thinking about it, and I think that's one of the things that the ad makers and these campaigns are going to think about, is that, is this the message that you want people, hovering over? And they might want to think about that one a little bit again.
You're also seeing people, there's an ad for against David Garcia from the RGA that includes a woman talking about her children and safety. Those sorts of things, those are designed to reach that demographic specifically. I'm sure people have message tested all of that, and we're going to start to see what messages they've decided now pull well with women specifically.
Well, we will be writing more about women and their impact on this elections, money in politics, and all of the candidates. Follow our coverage on azcentral.com and on your newsstand. Thanks for joining us.